You're listening to a Mamma Mia podcast.
Mamma Mia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamma Mia Out Loud, what women are actually talking about on Wednesday, the 3rd of July. I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens, and we're still arguing about what happened on Monday and Jill Biden, and Mia's still wrong, and we're just
I think
fired
we're
up.
the only people who care about this as much as we do. Like, we're all still rowing about Jill Biden
She
and
might
nobody
be
else
on
cares.
the cover of Vogue, but she carries the weight of not just America, but the world.
Yeah, let's blame her for
on
all
her
the
shoulders.
problems.
Yeah.
Not blaming, just saying she
Blaming.
carries a great responsibility
Oh,
and she
stop it.
needs to tell him to step
I can't
down.
bear it. As if Mia knows what's going on in their kitchen. Anyway.
She needs to hide the car
And
keys.
on the show
from Grandpa.
today, Poms, the pink economy, and high kicks from hell. Why everyone's arguing about cheerleaders this week. Also, is a world leader allowed to have Friday night off? What about any leader? This is the latest spat in the UK election. And a little-known underdog called Taylor Swift is under attack from a finger-wagging columnist, and Mia kind of agrees with him. But first, Jessie Stevens.
In case you missed it, there is a fiery debate unfolding about
In
car
the
park
Out Loud
etiquette.
studio.
Yes. About Jill Biden. No.
Yes.
You can find a way to make this Jill Biden's fault. But Abby Chatfield, who's a podcaster, television host, posted on Instagram this week, and she posed an am I the arsehole question, my favourite type of question, which was essentially, am I wrong in thinking people shouldn't beep you when you get in your car and you're not ready to go yet? I actually think it's so rude. Here's the context. Abby had just finished her yoga class, and after her yoga class, she was feeling a bit dizzy, a bit lightheaded, and she thought, shouldn't drive when I'm feeling dizzy. What I'll do is I'll have something to eat so I am a safe driver. So she sat in her driver's seat. She was having something to eat and someone behind her is going beep, beep, beep. And she was going, I've paid for parking. I've paid for 1 hour and 37 minutes. Still got 4 minutes left. Go, keep going. And she said, it's very rude of you to beep. I want to put this out. Mia, is Abby the asshole? Is the beeper the asshole?
I think Abby could have misinterpreted the beep. I've been in this position a lot because what I've noticed is that people will get into their cars now and they'll check their phone.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll sit there, they'll check their phone for a while, might send a few messages, do a bit of scrolling. And when you're looking for a car spot, that's really frustrating and also misleading and a bit confusing. So what I will sometimes do to get the attention of the driver who is absorbed in their phone or in their noodles, I will lightly go, beep, beep. I'll tap my horn to get their attention. And then I'll say, are you going or are you eating or scrolling?
Oh my
And
God.
they will say, no, I'm not going. And I don't give them the middle finger. I then drive away. Am I a bit irritated? Yes. But it wasn't an aggressive beep. It was just like, hey, I need you to answer a question
I don't know
for
if
me.
there are any beeps that aren't aggressive.
They're so
Except,
Are you kidding?
except for the beeps that are like, watch out. You know what I mean?
No.
I don't use
There's-
my horn ever.
Me
you
neither.
kidding?
I've
You
never, I
never-
don't even know where it is.
You never
I literally
gently
don't know where my horn
tap
is.
your
No.
horn.
No, I think it's
If
rude.
you-
It's aggressive.
if you're at lights or something and you want to get someone's attention and maybe they are scrolling, which is illegal, or maybe they're distracted, maybe they're having a little daydream and they didn't see that the lights have changed. What you can do at night, I'll flash my high beams because that's better than beeping, but you can just give the horn a little tap. That's not aggressive.
I'm
I
not
don't
a
mean
big
like
horn
a beep. I just mean
girl.
a beep, beep.
What I will say is that getting into your car
You guys don't know how to use your horns.
after like you've been shopping or you've been out and you get back into your car, giving people the benefit of the doubt. Often you've got to get your maps up. You might have a
Yep.
quick work thing. You might have a message, all of that. To say that people are scrolling, and they might be, but I would rather them get their stuff sorted before they start driving than sort their maps out as they're going through the car
You're not
park.
in, that
You're a good
parking
citizen.
spot is your parking spot until you vacate it. That's just the truth of
That's
it.
the rule.
This happened to me the other week. It wasn't in a car park. It was on the street. And I was about to drive back from Sydney. This is the whole thing. You never know someone's life, do you? I was about to drive back from Sydney. That's a 2-hour drive. I got into my car. I needed to answer a couple of urgent messages before I set off. And then I needed to set a thing to play while I was going. And I needed to just sort myself out for a minute, right? Woman drives up next to me, beep, 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 beep. And then going, I'm doing the motion that Mia does.
Yeah.
And I was like, put my hand up, like, give me a minute. And she's like, woo, 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 like gesturing wildly, really mad with me. Now, no doubt, I don't know her life. She's in a hurry. She's trying to find a park. Maybe she's got a medical appointment. Maybe she's got whatever,
Yeah.
right? But guys, we share the street. Just because I'm sitting in my car it doesn't mean that I have any lesser right to be there than you.
I agree that there's an etiquette thing, which is if you see them waiting, and I will do this, a little gesture, which is just like I'm actually going to be 5 or I'm going to whatever, that's courteous. Don't hate that.
Yeah.
But I also think that we're taking out the lack of parking in cities on each other.
Yeah.
I just think it is a bit
How about when you're in a shopping centre car park and you've got a pram and you get back to the car and someone's waiting for your spot and they're like, are you going? And you're like, yeah, I'm going. But it's going to take you a minute to like get the baby in, strap the baby in, fold down the thing, get all the stuff. And the pressure, they're waiting and then people are backing up behind them and they're waiting. And it's like, drive on, guys, find another car spot. Like,
go around the block.
Anxiety.
Yes, and then you start making mistakes because you don't like being watched. So I'm going to drop the baby and I'm going to put the pram in the car seat.
I'm just going to give the beeper the benefit of the doubt and saying that maybe they were just beeping to get her attention to ask her a question.
You need to look like a supermodel but perform like an athlete. Once that uniform comes on, all of the flaws and the problems go out the door.
Everyone's talking about the biggest show worldwide on Netflix this week, America's Sweethearts, Dallas Cowboys Cheerleaders. And there is a ton to unpack about this show. It's a documentary, in case you haven't seen it, in many parts, that covers the choosing of the 2023 squad for the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders, who are the most famous cheerleaders for probably the most famous team in the NFL, which is American football. There's a ton to unpack about this show, which we have done on a separate episode for subscribers. Everything from the incredibly strict rules that the cheerleaders have to follow. These rules cover everything from morality to the shape of their eyebrows and, of course, their weight. But today we want to talk about the topic of the pink economy and where the cheerleaders are having a bit of a resurgence worldwide after being a little bit on the nose over the last 10 years or so. The Dallas Cowboys are one of the wealthiest and profitable NFL teams. They're worth around $9 billion US. Even though the cheerleaders as a business division within the company make millions of dollars through the sales of calendars and sponsorships, they personally only make for their season between about $15,000 and $22,000. And that breaks down as about $12 per hour they're paid and about $400 on game days, which can last around 18 hours. Obviously, their work is incredibly grueling. They have to do a lot of stuff like fake tan and hair and makeup and all of that stuff that they have to do themselves. In comparison, a Dallas Cowboys mascot earns around $65,000. An NFL water boy, the guy who runs on the field with water, $53,000 he earns for the season. Now, there have been lawsuits in America. There was one from Buffalo Bills cheerleader who claimed that she got just $105 for an entire season after she had all of her costs taken into account, including having to pay more than $600 for her own uniform. By 2020, 10 of the NFL's 32 teams had been sued for wage theft and harassment and unsafe working conditions and discrimination, all different things. It got us wondering about what the situation with cheerleaders was here in Australia. Our daily news podcast, The Quickie, did a deep dive on cheerleaders in the NRL in Australia. Here's a little bit of that episode.
When you finally were getting paid, were you getting paid enough?
Well, no, upon reflection, it was like $50 a game that we'd get paid. So you're not doing it for the money, you're doing it for the love. And you're obviously working another job on the side. I had a full-time role and I would, at the end of the day, get into the bathrooms, jazz up, drive off to the cheerleading gig and get that done as well. So, yeah, you're juggling the life.
Did you feel pressure, even if it wasn't implicitly implied, did you feel pressure to maintain a certain weight whilst you were performing as a cheerleader?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is very standard in the dance industry generally. It's something we're always dealing with. I've had other contracts where we've been weighed weekly. We weren't specifically with the cheer squad weighed or anything like that, but it is a very much an unspoken rule that, you have to maintain the same weight as you were hired.
Jessie, do you think we should implement weigh-ins here at Mamma Mia Out Loud?
Well, I think what you really should be asking is, if you guys love this job so much, then why are we paying you? Which is
because a lot of people would like to host this show.
Exactly. And I thought you did it for the love. And if you did it for the love, everyone knows that you can't also be paid. Those two things that
make the Out Louders happy. Isn't that what you do?
Yeah, exactly right. And
cheer.
if you're not doing it, I've got 500 other girls.
Yeah.
With false eyelashes and big hair that are very happy to take your spot.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking in the subscriber episode and we sat down. It was meant to be a short episode and I had 40 minutes. We We thought we'd probably overdone it.
And was like, I'm turning off the microphones.
And it still wasn't enough. So we're like, let's talk about it on the main show.
When we talked about it there, we were saying I can't imagine a male comparison. Like the football players also love it and also love the camaraderie, but they also are decently paid. And one thing that I've learned from this show as well as Cheer is the incredible athleticism of these dancers, of these cheerleaders. And I was thinking about how culturally, probably from Bring It On, remember the movie Bring It On?
Yeah.
It's like we have been trying to relaunch or rebrand or rehabilitate the cheerleading image, because certainly in the 90s, after a few waves of feminism, it was seen as a bit on the nose and potentially objectifying. I was a kid who went to a lot of NRL games, and you would see the cheerleaders and you would hear the way that the men talked about them. And I didn't feel that it was aspirational at that time, because I thought I would never want men to talk about me.
I always
like
wanted
that.
to be a cheerleader when I was a kid.
Really?
Desperately. I remember in 2007, you're right, that's kind of when it started to be a little bit on the nose. And Russell Crowe, who owns the South Sydney Rabbitohs Club, he got rid of cheerleaders for them because he said it made male fans feel uncomfortable, which I don't know if that's true. And he said our focus
I
is
know exactly what he's saying.
to re-establish rugby league and women. So he was saying that the cheerleaders would sexualize the atmosphere and they were trying to make it more of a family game.
Mm-hmm.
So he briefly replaced them with a group of drummers, male and female. So there was like halftime entertainment. That only lasted a couple of years. They weren't very popular, and now they just have music and videos on the big screen.
As do quite a lot of teams in the NRL. So the reason in Australia we'd be talking about the NRL is the AFL do not have cheerleaders. They did once upon a time. There was something called the Swanettes and the Sydney Swans, in fact, but they haven't done for ages and ages. Whereas these days, some NRL teams do and some NRL teams don't. More than half do still, though. And it's interesting because the two dancers who were interviewed on the Quickie were both NRL cheerleaders, and they were talking, as they said, about how the reasons why they did it, because as they spelt it out, it wasn't money, that's for sure, because they were saying that what your job entails is at least 2 rehearsals a week, meet and greets before and after the game, staying on the field to watch the entire game, always, obviously, and all that breaks down to an hourly rate of about $5 an hour. So you're not doing it for the money. So they said, why do they do it? They said they loved dancing, loved performing, loved rugby league, wanted to be part of the club and participate. Now, the thing that I find really hard to unpick in all this, because watching the Dallas Cowboy Cheerleaders show, and we said this on the show yesterday, there is no doubt I got to the end of that series and had nothing but admiration for these dancers. I really did. They were all amazing women. They all had other jobs. They were doing amazing things. Their work ethic was unquestionable. They behaved towards each other in a really beautiful sisterly way. There was I didn't have any criticism of them. But I find it interesting that when I was consuming this documentary in an obsessive fashion over the past week or so, whenever my teenage daughter would walk in the room, I would turn it off because I didn't really want her to see it. Why? You know what I mean? Like if I question myself. And one of the things is that my daughter, who's 14, loves sport. And she's a mad AFL player. And so every Sunday, and actually 4 times a week at the moment, she is out on a field running around in short shorts and a tight top, but running around, getting muddy, getting dirty, getting sweaty, playing the actual game. I respect dancers enormously and I respect the entertainment factor, but I think it's very hard to unpick in a code like NRL in particular that has a lot of issues, let's be honest, with attitudes towards women that they've been trying to undo with various levels of commitment and success for decades, that the involvement of women they want is that kind, a decorative ornamental role that is there specifically to applaud when the men on the field do something good rather than doing the thing themselves. And what's interesting is the world is shifting that way. Last week it was the NRL Women's State of Origin final. It was sold out in a massive stadium. They had 2 million people watching it on television. That is unprecedented. That is change that is happening at an amazing rate. It was a great game. My daughter watched that and oh my God, was she in awe of those women who were smashing into each other on the field, throwing them on the floor, highly competitive, competing for a cup.
I'm in awe of the athleticism of the dancers too. And I know what you're saying, Holly, because even in the documentary, you watch it and you see that. So Dallas Cowboys are this incredibly powerful, wealthy institution. If you want to be part of it, your options are cheerleader or biologically related to man who runs it.
Maybe
right?
working behind the scenes. I'm sure they've got
Yes.
a lot of women in the offices.
Most of the women that we saw were kind of the cheerleader. And it is a powerful institution, right?
So it's very much the ultimate patriarchal structure, whereas the men are doing the things and the women are literally supporting them and cheering them.
Who are we blaming here? And I think about myself and my own naivety and being probably quite judgmental years and years ago, where I would look at the cheerleaders and what they were wearing or whatever and would probably denigrate a little bit them. That's internalized misogyny, and that's almost victim blaming, because it's like, if you are a dancer, and dancers are some of the most athletic, hardworking, impressive athletes I know.
Poorly paid as well.
Yes.
Yep.
What are your options? And
Yeah.
this is what I kept
If you love
thinking.
dancing-
If you love dancing and you are really, really good
Can
at
you
it.
dance at home?
Yeah.
Like, I guess. But yeah.
I totally understand why that
Yeah.
would be what you do. And we all routinely undermine it, just like we do anything women do.
I think, though, because part of what you need to do in that context is the sexy aspect. So you can't pretend that that's not part of it. They're not out there in comfortable clothes and shoes. It's sexualized. And the dancers themselves say, oh, because we've got to move this certain way, which is like hips first. We're all throwing our backs out. We've got, broken hips. We're damaging our bodies because it's quite sexualized. That is very different to just say ballet. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but when you say, oh, why does it make us feel a bit as women, I think it's that part.
I reckon that this could be a cultural reckoning where we're pivoting and going, hang on. I was even thinking with cheer and even with this, I was like, this should be in the Olympics. I would watch this
Cheer
if this were
should be in
Olympic
the
sport.
Olympics.
Like
Cheer
these,
should definitely be in the
like-
Olympics. But cheer
But
is
they're
different. If you
gymnasts.
haven't watched it, and maybe you've watched cheer, cheer is different. So that is literally about gymnastics. It's about doing leaps and pyramids and all that kind of stuff. Because in cheer, they're not cheering. They're not like on
Anyone.
the sideline of a
Yeah.
game. They're the main event.
Yeah.
And it's also, men and women. But for this, it's literally on the side of the event. As Holly said, it's either halftime entertainment or when the men do something on the field, the women do little dances on the side. And it's also being ambassadors because they also go out into the community and they make calendars and they sign and they go visit people in nursing homes and kindergartens and they bring some of that glamour. So they're part of the branding, but it's like the sex sells part of the
I
branding.
think the reason I feel uncomfortable, because I've said before, when the NRL was having this big reckoning and trying to figure out how to get more women at games and make them feel more comfortable, that's when a lot of teams started letting their cheerleaders go. And I remember writing some stories around that and getting pushback from women who worked in that field and being like, you make it sound like I am a stripper. And they'd say, no disrespect to dancers who are working in adult clubs, but that is not what I do. And you're making it sound like I am. And this is a highly skilled thing and all that stuff. I totally take all that on board. And as I said, watching these women, I have nothing but admiration. I think the problem is it feels like a throwback to a time when that was the only way women could get status in that world, right? And
in the world, full stop.
yes, but specifically in male-dominated environments like that, is that you think about the cheerleader, think about every high school movie you've ever seen, any story you've ever read about that world, particularly in America, and it is an imported American thing here in Australia. The cheerleaders are the popular girls, the beautiful girls, the girls who date the quarterback, the girls everybody's like either wants to be or is frightened of, right? And so when I look at these women and you think, oh, you get to play in that world, but only in that role, it sort of throws me back to that idea. Whereas actually now, as I was just saying about the women's NRL, there are lots of different ways that women can be involved in sport now, and they are literally breaking down doors. So I can appreciate what the cheerleaders do, but I think probably the reason why I closed my computer when my daughter walked in the room is I'm like, I don't want her to think that is the only way for a woman to be involved in something she loves, which is that sporting football world.
Well, for those women, though, the football world wasn't what they loved. The dancing was what they loved.
Yeah, but a lot of these women would say that that's why they chose cheerleading, is they loved dancing and they wanted to be part of their team.
Yes. But I
But what's
wonder,
interesting is that they can't have any contact with the football players. Why do you think that is? It's never explained. And I thought the voices of the Dallas Cowboys was really missing from this documentary, to have not one of them. I want to know what the footballers think of them.
I was reading about how they're not allowed to fraternise, and even in some cases they're not allowed to follow any of them on Instagram. Like there's not allowed to be any interest between the two.
Why?
They don't travel together.
I think I don't know why.
Well, if something does happen The cheerleader, unsurprisingly, is let go.
Yep.
And the football player keeps his
So
job.
it's to protect the women.
Yeah.
And the men's reputation.
Yeah, the men's reputation.
I'm being sarcastic. It's not to protect the women. It's
Well, and the idea
sort
is
of.
too that those women are held up as a male fantasy. And in order to be a male fantasy, they have to take off their wedding rings. They are not allowed to touch their boyfriends anywhere around the stadium. They are to be looked at but not touched.
Yep.
The idea is that they are – it's like the Madonna whore complex that we were talking about, where it's these women are just elevated and it almost would like plummet their status if they were touched by someone. Like it's revolting.
Also-
It's incredibly regressive.
because
But I
that would
think
make them dirty sluts
Yes,
if they had
yes.
had sex
Yeah.
or were in any way. Even though they portray themselves sexually and that's the point, they're both Madonna and whore in this analogy.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I also think that no fraternization policies are relatively new. And I think that's because of that whole cheerleader quarterback stereotype I was talking about before. And that part of the denigration of cheerleaders is they're only there to snare themselves a footballer who are the ultimate high status alpha males, right? So they're trying to unpick some of all the mess that can then follow that situation.
And
if you imagine that the cheerleaders and the footballers are out drinking together after games and all, like you can only imagine.
But
Like,
it sounds like
it's PR management as
And
well.
sexual purity.
Yes, but
And
it's also
also-
PR
Well,
management.
they've got these morality codes, don't they?
Yes, and also I guess there's a power imbalance. There's a workplace power imbalance.
Definitely
Which
there
is that
is.
from payment to where you stand in the hierarchy, like, yeah, women can be exploited.
You
But
don't matter.
there are a lot of rules that I was going through. So I found this one interesting. You're not allowed to wear glitter eyeshadow. It must be matte. So they don't like glitter. No visible tattoos.
I did notice that. None of them had tattoos, which is
yeah.
unusual for a group of women that age.
No going out in jeans or sweatpants. So they have to be seen glammed up. Even if you're going to the local shops in Texas, like you are a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader always.
Wow.
I find full hair and makeup to training every day completely
So
unnecessary.
do I. And there was a scene in this. There was a scene in the show where one of the women doesn't wear makeup to training and she gets a big telling off. And it was like, you haven't made an effort. It's like you don't care if you just rolled out of bed. Like, what would, and they, used the name of some iconic cheer. What
Yeah.
would they think of this today? And she was like, oh, I'm just tired.
You can't be anywhere where alcohol is served.
But isn't that a football game?
Well, you're not
Yes.
allowed to be near the bar. You're not allowed to go to parties on the weekend because of your proximity to alcohol. And you're not allowed to eat after 6 p.m. That's just
Sorry?
Yeah, you're not allowed to eat after 6 p.m. says it in the rule book.
Well, I was on my way to try out for next year, but now that the tattoo rule, that's going to disqualify
And
me.
I like to eat my dinner at 7.
I just hope that the Netflix success, if there is one message that viewers are sending the world, it is that Dallas Cowboys, cheerleaders are the main event. Like they are what everyone wants to watch. I don't give a shit about American football. I could watch those cheerleaders cheer all day long.
The footballers should be on the sidelines cheering Thunderstruck.
Out Louders, on behalf of Mum Mia Out Loud, I want to apologise. I want to apologise.
I think it's okay.
If you heard any strange jingle sounds in that segment, this is funny because we're recording it in post and it just makes me giggle. That's because Mia is wearing shoe jewellery. Which, if you're wondering, isn't a thing. It's not a thing.
It is. It's a necklace that goes around my shoe, but I didn't realise that it was going to be an audio hazard. I'm
So if you hear some jingle jangle, that would be Mia's shoe jewellery in the background. Sorry about that distraction.
Sorry.
This month, Mamma Mia turns 17. We know birthdays aren't all that exciting when they're not, well, your birthday. There aren't enough presents. So we want to take this as a chance to give you a treat and say thank you for being on the ride with us.
Right now, you can get $20 off a yearly Mamma Mia subscription with the code OUTLOUDBIRTHDAY.
The offer is valid for a limited time only, and you'll find all the details of how to do that in the show notes. Enjoy. My friends.
A man named Kier Starmer, a Labor politician who wants to invest in the NHS, improve state schools, clamp down on companies that harm the environment and increase the minimum wage, will likely by the end of this week be the new Prime Minister of Britain. He is 61 years old, he's got 2 kids, a 16 and a 13-year-old, and, this will become relevant, his wife is Jewish. I mentioned that she's Jewish because on Friday nights, the family observe traditional Shabbat dinners. Mia, Shabbat means...
Shabbat.
I can't say it.
You've been going to them for a while.
I
but
know.
You can't
I'm
at
wedded
our house.
to the bat of it all.
Yeah.
But it's Shabbat.
Shabbat.
Shabbat. And it
Shabbat.
means rest. I
Yeah.
don't, like, not literally,
It's
but...
like, you know how the Christians have the day of rest is Sunday.
Mm.
The Jews go from sunset on Friday to sunset on Saturday. That's when you're meant to rest. The Jews rest on Saturday.
Right. Okay. So...
And Friday night, usually, it's like a time when you have a family meal. So the family just comes together and you have a meal as
Challah.
a tradition. You have certain bread, you have wine, you do a couple of blessings. Some people, you know, depending on how religious they are, do more. But generally, it's like an informal way for the family to get together every Friday night.
It's family time and it's switch off.
Yeah.
Starmer told Virgin Radio that they have a strategy in place, which is to carve out protected time for the kids. So after 6 o'clock on a Friday night, he will not do work-related things. He said there are, of course, a few exceptions, but broadly, that's what they do. His political opponents, as well as many opinion columnists, got very angry. One conservative politician tweeted, "What if Putin attacks at 6:01 p.m.?" While others mocked that there would be global conflict unfolding and Starmer would be busy trying to finish his book. Grant Feller wrote for The Independent that he doesn't believe family should always come first and that he envies Starmer's childlike naivety in his endearing devotion to family. He writes, "It's unrealistic to think that you can suddenly shift between being a good employer and a good parent at 6 p.m. What a ridiculous metaphor switching off is. If you've got a stressful job and you love it, there is no switch, there is no off." Holly, you'd think Starmer had declared that he was adopting the 4-hour work week.
really
how
would.
everyone responded.
I remember that.
Rather than saying that one day out of every 7 he will look in the direction of his children when the sun goes down.
Exactly.
What is this all about?
I think it's really interesting because there is a definite little undercurrent there, possibly not so little, that can be decided, of anti-Semitism. There definitely is. But even if you take that out and set it aside, there is a massive overreach here from the Tories who are going to lose this election in spectacular fashion. And maybe I will be eating my words on Friday night, but I doubt it, to find anything they can throw at Kier Starmer. And to be clear, Kier Starmer is not actually desperately popular like everybody's like, yay, Kier Starmer, we love him. They're just like, get those people out of office. They have made a right mess over the 14 years they've been in charge. So they are showing their desperation, I think, in this. So as you've said, Jessie, people are like, what if Putin attacks at 6:01? People are tweeting back who work for Kier Starmer. Then he will pick up his phone.
He'll jump online. He'll answer the email.
Jump online. I think
He'll put his book down.
Exactly. No one is saying, and not what is not being said here, and this is the thing that's really interesting, is I think it shows a clash of culture, and I don't mean about the religious aspect, I mean about the work at all costs culture and any attempt at having balance, which in the hustle culture is a dirty word, that is vastly out of touch because most people these days understand that probably to be a good leader, a good boss, do a good job, maybe you need to have a little bit of something else in your life, and that asking for a few hours when you don't need to be on is not an unreasonable thing. Or is it, Mia Freedman?
No, I think that's true. I think that ironically, when Kevin Rudd was Prime Minister, one of the criticisms of him by people who worked for him were that he only slept for like 4 hours a night and the rest of the time he was working. And to some people that played, and to him, because he let that be known, that played as dedication, work ethic, high performance behaviour. Whereas to others, those who were criticising it, it was portrayed as you don't have any perspective. Like when you don't look around, people often say this of artists, and we'll get to Taylor Swift shortly, but when you're an artist, you have to live in the world to be able to make art. Or if you're an actor, if you're just a famous person, then it's very hard to play different characters because you're not exposed to them anymore. So I think that
but being a political leader, presumably you need to understand what actual real people who don't live in your bubble think about things. So that's also a reason why they need to live in the world a little more, right?
Oh, 100%. And I'm saying that this is an argument for living in the
Yes,
world
yeah.
and for switching off. It's true. No one really switches off. Like, we're always at the end of a phone, aren't we? I don't think this means, I mean, in some strict Orthodox households, it's literally phones off. They don't use technology for 24 hours. No one's suggesting that that's what happens in his household or that he's going to do that he's going to be uncontactable after 6 o'clock on a Friday. But I think that idea of, as you said so beautifully, Jessie, I'm going to face my attention towards my family. Or if you don't have a family, towards my dog, towards my parents, towards my friends, towards my
Health.
book,
Yeah.
whatever it happens to be. I'm going to look away from my work, and that will actually make me better at my work when I come back.
The book thing's funny because I don't know if the person who said, will he look up from his book to solve a global conflict has ever spent time with a family at 6 p.m. on a Friday, but you would be more likely to be reading a book skydiving than you would sitting around having family time. There's a real sense that it's lazy and not that it's a different type of work, or that it's an investment that, as you say, makes you better at your job. In this article I read in The Guardian, it was saying that from Tony Blair to Gordon Brown, the toll that their leadership took on them, from mood to health to how they look, was enormous. And then when you look at the best leaders, they all had something. And mostly, like, they prioritised family. Winston Churchill famously painted. Like, they had to have something, because otherwise you become so burnt out and tired that you're not able to function at your job.
Isn't it interesting, though, and I did this too, that all of us have defended the switch off time as something that will make you better at your job time.
Yeah.
Like, no one is saying, and just it might make you happier and you might be a better person. We are all so deeply marinated in productivity culture that it's like, well, we have to find a justification for why having a few hours where I don't check emails might make me better at work.
Well, Benji Marshall, who is the West Tigers NRL coach at the moment, he's a former player, he has spoken about this in recent months and got so much shit from the NRL community.
He's quite a new coach, isn't he?
Yeah. He's just started this year. And in the lead up to his debut, he said, I'm not going to be a 24/7 coach, and I put my family before my job, which is something that players, coaches, you never ever say that. Here's a little bit of what he said.
I come into work early before the players, work as hard as we can until we get what we need done, then we go home. Because I prioritise my family between 5 and 8 p.m. every night to find a work-life balance, that doesn't mean I don't care about my job or care about working hard.
I think that's an outstanding way to model what it means to be a man, what it means to be a person.
So there was all this crap and coaches, there's, this ideal of a coach who tries to go to the movies, but he's actually just plotting what they're going to do on the field and blah, blah, blah. And remember, it was only less than 2 years ago, Paul Green, who was a Queensland coach, NRL coach, took his own life. I think he was about 49. And there was this big discussion about mental health and how to look after each other. And then we have Benji Marshall coming out, who has 2 little kids as well. So he's at a very specific moment in his life. And he's saying, between 5 and 8, I'm going to be with my kids. They had a bye one week, so they had a game off, and he went to Fiji with his family. That was just laughed at, like, oh, you're going on a holiday now. And he's saying, nah, like I actually believe in work-life balance. It's something that I want to model. And I have a team around me of people that I trust. So when I'm not there, the work can get done.
See, that's also key to this, right? If you're looking at it from a leadership level. When he says that, and he says, I've got really experienced guys on my staff. I've got all these people I trust, and I'm going to empower them to do their job. I don't need to be there and across absolutely everything all the time. That is really generous to the other people you work with. But it's interesting because he also said that he knew that the culture was, and this certainly is not only in sport, it had always been a good leader as someone who says, you can't outwork me. I will work harder than everyone here. I will be the first one in and the last one out. I'll turn the lights on and I'll turn the lights off. And that was the model. And I think it's really interesting that we're now seeing different models of success that don't look like that. And the idea that saying that for 3 hours a day, between 5 and 8, you don't want to be working is outrageous. It just seems crazy.
I think it can be tricky as a boss or a manager or a leader because I've felt the pressure in both ways. I've felt the pressure to work more and I've felt the pressure to work less. So I do feel that I have to role model that I'm the co-founder and co-owner of this business. yeah, I will work damn hard and I will work harder than anyone else because I expect everybody to work hard. So that includes myself.
But what's working hard mean? Is being offline between 5 and 8 not working hard? And I don't mean in the specifics of like, what if the Queen dies?
Yeah.
I don't mean that.
Yeah.
I mean in general.
Yeah, I know. So there have been times when I've thought I was really conscious of what time I would get into the office and what time I would leave. But then you read about how bosses need to model boundaries. And so there was all this talk a few years ago about how bosses had to leave noisily because some people, and I know when I've worked in jobs before, you don't want to leave before the boss, right? Certainly when I had little kids, it felt like the walk of shame. Like you don't want to sort of sneak out and everyone's going, oh, she's not very committed. And in fact, when I did work in a male-dominated industry in commercial television, I did have to leave to go home and breastfeed my baby. And I would, of course, jump online straight away. But after I left, it was, leaked to the media. Oh, she wasn't very committed. She wouldn't put in the hours. So it's really hard. And I feel pressure both ways. I feel pressure not to work on weekends now a lot because I don't expect other people to. But for me, sometimes that's the only time I've got to do my work. It's tricky.
I reckon I also was definitely always a get there early, leave late person, no question. For many, many, many years, it was important because those either ends of the day were sometimes times you could get things done because everybody else wasn't there wanting your attention, asking you questions, meetings, I need to talk to you about blah. These hours were precious. The thing is all that stuff has really been thrown in the air with the fact that we can work anywhere now, which is a really good thing, right? Like it's life-changing that you could leave and be home to have dinner with your kids but then do your emails after 8. Like that is actually life-changing. And I remember work, and Mia would too, when that was not possible. Like when you went home, you couldn't work anymore. So you would stay in the office until I had plenty of years of work when I would be in the office at 8, 9 o'clock regularly,
My
all the
boss
time.
used to sleep on the couch in her office often.
Office was the only place to work. And so now obviously you can work everywhere. That's a really good thing. But then the flip side of it is it's a bad thing because now if you say, well, I just want between 5 and 8 to not be responsive. And the problem is everybody's got different schedules. So if you want between 5 and 8, but your boss actually wants to message you at that time, then you're in a real push-pull. So I don't know. I find it hard, but I love all these different models coming up of different ways of caring about your job.
And I love that it's men as well. Women have been talking about this for a long time, and men talking about it is very refreshing.
Do you want daily Out Loud access? Why wouldn't you? We drop episodes every Tuesday and Thursday exclusively for Mamma Mia subscribers. Follow the link in the show notes to get us in your ears 5 days a week. And a huge thank you if you're already a subscriber.
In Taylor Swift news,
Taylor Swift.
Taylor.
I've been watching the Taylor Swift cutaways.
I was very excited to hear what Mia thought about Taylor Swift.
Taylor bloody Swift.
A disclaimer. On Monday, I told Mia she wasn't allowed to bring this story.
So did I.
I wasn't allowed to talk about it.
She was outnumbered.
As loud as I tried.
You did, darling, you did. It's about a column published in Newsweek, which is a credible American news publication.
Yeah, but stupid column.
Oh, such a stupid column. Yeah. The column was written by a writer called John McGillen. It won't surprise anybody to know that he's a conservative commentator. And in it, he claimed that Taylor Swift, the trademarked queen of the world, is a bad role model for young women because she is unmarried and does not have children. Not to mention, McGillen writes, that she has had at least a dozen relationships with men. He wrote, this revolving door of relationships may reflect the normal dating experiences of many young women in today's world, but it also raises questions about stability, commitment, and even love itself. Should we encourage young girls to see the Swift standard as the norm and something to aspire to, or should we be promoting something a little more, shall we say, wholesome? Would any loving parent reading this want their daughter to date 12 different men in the span of a few years? This is not an attack on Swift. It's a valid question that is worth asking.
It is, though, an attack on Swift.
Mia said,
her a slut.
Mia said, we have to take this dude down. I said, calm down, Mia. Taylor's doing great. She doesn't need us. Let's argue about Jill Biden instead. And then, well, it just kept escalating. And Out Louders started asking us why Mia is leaving the gates of Taylor's virtue undefended. And we had to relent. And then something surprising happened, because when we were talking about it today, Mia discovered she does have one thing in common with McGillen. She really, really wants Taylor to get married and have a baby. Mia, explain yourself.
Well, this was my favourite hate read of the week. It's the gift that keeps on giving, because his main criticism of her as a role model, and in the first few paragraphs he details all her achievements and basically says she's an extraordinary businesswoman, she's the most famous woman in the world, she's a powerhouse, except she's not married with kids, therefore she's not a good role model for our sisters and our daughters. And I thought, look, I do want Taylor Swift to have a baby because I hate myself for thinking this. I just want her to experience what it's like, and I think she'd be a great mother.
Oh, my goodness, Mia.
Do I think not having a baby – I don't give a shit if she's married or not. Do I think being married and having a baby has anything to do with her being a role model? No. This is about my love for Taylor and my desire for her to experience – the full spectrum, a little bit like we spoke about before, of life. She'll write some fucking great songs about
No
it.
one experiences the full spectrum of life.
I want to read
because
her
you
songs
miss
about
out on
motherhood.
things. Kids, you miss out on certain experiences, and everyone has a different set of incredible mind-altering,
and there'll be people listening
mind-widening.
to this. I know who are going to say, you're suggesting that because I don't have kids, I haven't experienced the full spectrum.
Yep.
I would say that I haven't experienced the full spectrum. I've never been with a woman. I've never lived in a different country for a long period of time. There's lots of the full spectrum I also haven't experienced.
Haven't played a stadium with that many people
I haven't
singing
played
your
a
name
stadium.
I can't speak another language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't tap dance. There's many aspects. I haven't run onto a field to the strains of Thunderstruck.
Yet.
There's so many things that I haven't experienced. But I just think Taylor is a seeker of experience, and I love the things she writes about those experiences. And I genuinely, I want to hear what Taylor's done for me and many other people is she's helped me make sense of experiences in my life through her music and through her lyrics. That's why I would like to hear her views.
If only
on
you
motherhood.
could hear someone else's views about motherhood, of which there are many books, many songs, many poems, many Instagram accounts that you could go to dive deeper into the experience of motherhood. I think we've lost sight of what a role model means. I don't think we know what it means anymore. When someone is a role model.
Oh, I'm not arguing that she's not a role model. My God, this man is a tool.
It's like, since when does someone who you look up to, you use them as sort of a Barbie doll to enact the exact life choices you would make? I was thinking about
Yes, that's why Mia wants her to have a baby.
It was very threatening. This guy's clearly very threatened because all the things he lists, all the criticisms of Taylor, when he keeps saying, but they're not criticisms, but they are, because you're calling her a dirty slut, a barren whore, like here. And then he's like, no criticism of Taylor. They're all about his greatest fears as the upholder of the patriarchy. Like, it's wild because he writes this. It was hard to find my favorite parts, but he says that her numerous high-profile relationships, while private matters, are constantly in the public eye. New romances become media feeding frenzies, while breakups fuel the gossip columns. How is this her fault?
That's because of you, sweetie.
And then he says that she makes breakups look easy. In reality, though, they are
really
messy, painful affairs. Have you listened to the Tortured Poets Department? Have you listened to All Too Well?
And then he suggests that breakups are only hurtful to women, which is very unusual.
Do you know about Jake Gyllenhaal
I
holding
have
her
a lot of
scarf
questions
still?
I have a lot of questions about all of
Sir.
it. One of them is about how this article got published, because it's not even very good, and
No.
it feels like it has done its job in that it will have absolutely trafficked through the roof because everybody's gone on to hate read it. And he probably was someone who said, you know what, I'll take one for circulation this week and I can take the haters, because anyone who writes this kind of shit about Taylor is right now literally under a mountain of crap. Personally, Taylor's serial monogamy is one of my favourite things about her, and I will genuinely be disappointed if she gets married and has a baby. I'm like, no, Taylor, give us a different role model. Like, that's one of the things I love about her. Some stereotypes and archetypes she very much upholds, being a beautiful, skinny, tall, like white lady and all the rest of it. But she has overturned so many archetypes about what female artists are capable of, can do, and all that stuff.
Power.
And I also love the fact that she is and she is not public, let's be honest, apart from this latest relationship. She's not actually public about her relationships, but we are all obsessed with them. And the fact that she has dated quite a few dudes, different kinds of dudes, experienced lots of different relationships. I love that about her because that's the experience of lots and lots of women.
My favourite point that he makes is this. The superstar's vocal criticisms of the patriarchy add another layer of complexity. Swift's recent rallying cry against patriarchal structures, she does say fuck the patriarchy in one of her songs quite famously, stands in stark contrast to her personal dating choices. The singer often dates strong, influential men, celebrities who embody significant social and economic power. This can appear hypocritical. Swift either doesn't realise this or doesn't care. Neither of the two is a good look. I don't think he understands about power because
I don't think he knows what patriarchy
power
is
than any of these
He
men.
thinks that patriarchy looks and is Travis Kelce, and that's not right.
And my least favourite thing about the whole Travis Kelce narrative is the whole, she's finally found her prince. I can't wait for the ring on the finger and the baby in the belly. I'm like, bleh, I don't want that. I want her to keep being awesome.
There was a day.
Hang on, why are the two mutually exclusive?
They're not. There's
'Cause
just
this is
one of them is
transgressive.
very predictable and it's a very full narrative because once she does get married and have a baby, all of the idea will be like, she'd achieved all these great things, but motherhood's her greatest role yet. And I could just say, oh.
Do you mean like how we all felt at the end of Sex and the City, the TV show, when they all were paired up? Remember that? And everybody was a bit like, oh, well, that's not really what we wanted. That idea of everyone being happily ever after with a partner.
I remember about maybe 6 years ago, I came into work and I thought, I want to go viral today. And I wrote an opinion I didn't believe. Yes. And it didn't even do what I wanted it to. But it was like I knew what the features of a viral opinion would be. That's what this man has done. He doesn't believe this. It is very...
Oh, no, I think he does.
I'm doing year 8 debating.
It wasn't very convincing.
It was year 8 debating.
Have an argument.
And he'd been given
stated.
a card that said, argue that Taylor Swift bad role model. And he was like, she bad role model because unmarried.
But do you know, I think he can't be honest. He wouldn't have the self-reflection or self-awareness to say, I think she's a bad role model because what's going to happen if all of the women decide they don't need men?
And the irony is...
Oh, no. Where does that leave me?
Liam Hemsworth, Dev Patel, 34-year-old men who don't have kids. You want to talk about Leonardo DiCaprio? He's never been married and he's never had kids and he's nearly 50.
And what about that Travis Kelce?
Oh, Travis Kelce. And also, how about Elon Musk? You want to talk about a bad role model? 12 kids, sleeps on the floor.
He's just had another one.
Of ex-headquarters and doesn't appear to have a whole lot to do with any of them. But when it comes to men, we're able to pick and choose bits of their lives that we admire, and then the family thing we can just kind of feels a bit irrelevant. But for women, it's like their personal choices are part of whether they're a role model.
You wouldn't want to be this guy's daughter, would you?
That is it for today. Thank you so much to our wonderful team for making this episode happen. And thank you, Outlouders, for listening to us today, arguing about things as we have been doing all week.
If you want to listen to the episode everyone's talking about where we really go toe-to-toe, bare-knuckle, bin fire about Jill Biden, we will put a link in the show notes in case you missed that one. I think that's now going in our canon as one of our greatest hits.
It was a really fun argument.
Can you let us know in the Outlouders Facebook group? We want to know where you sit on Jill Biden because Holly and I just think Mia's lost the plot.
Bye.
Bye.
Shout out to any Mamma Mia subscribers listening. If you love the show and you want to support us, subscribing to Mamma Mia is the very best way to do it. There's a link in the episode description.